Growing up, my sister Sansa loved stories with princesses and knights, but I always wanted to be scared. When my turn came, I would ask old Nan to tell us of magic and monsters. Long ago, when the world was new, the children of the forest sang the song of the earth, and the earth listened. Magic was strong in those days, and the children could commune with all the beasts of the forest, streams, and air. The greatest of them could even leave their bodies to hunt, swim, and fly in the skins of animals. They were the first wargs. Then, the first men came, with fire and sword. They burned the weirwoods and cut down the children. Calling on dark magic, the children raised the sea and shattered the land bridge that the first men had crossed into dawn. When that failed, the children brought down the hammer of waters upon the neck, flooding and transforming it into the bog it is today. After peace came, the two races shared the land and the children's gods for thousands of years. Now comes the good part. Nobody knows how or why, but the magic of the children began to emerge in men. Maybe one child in 1,000 would be born a warg. Fewer still would be born with the sight. Old Nan would not speak of it, and Maester Luwin never believed in it. But with it, the children could know of events far away and even those still to come. Some say the sight was the children's most powerful and terrible secret, and helped turn the tide during the long night. Magic has since fled our world. Among the small folk, any child suspected of being a warg will be left out to die. Beyond the wall, though, a careless hunter might still find his prey has claws and teeth, and a man's mind to guide them, for the wildlings have a different idea of monsters. But even wildlings keep their distance from a warg, because, and here old Nan would lean in close and whisper, how can you tell if the man is wearing the beast, or the beast is wearing the man? Now, old Nan has no more tales, and Maester Luwin will never scoff again. That's fine. I don't like scary stories anymore, because I'm in one.
I was born youngest of 8 in Myr, across the narrow sea. So my father gave me over to the Red Temple. In their wisdom, they decided to make me a priest instead of a warrior or a temple prostitute like other children. It was not the path I would have chosen. Sure, I prayed the prayers and I spoke the spells, but I also led raids on the kitchens. And from time to time, they found girls in my bed. Such wicked girls. I never knew how they got there. Then again, I did have a gift for tongues. And when I gazed into the flames, well, from time to time I saw things. Even so, I was more bother than I was worth. When the High Priest foresaw Robert's ascension, he sent me to turn the Storm Lord to the Lord of Light. When Robert seized his crown, we'd take all of Westeros from the Seven in a single stroke. Perhaps they thought Robert would listen to a kindred spirit, or perhaps celibacy had addled the High Priest's brain. I didn't know, and didn't care. I was free. I did my duty as I saw it, drinking and whoring and waving my sword around. The only gods Robert cared about anyway. Years passed, Robert became king, I became a joke. We both became fat. I even won some glory in Greyjoy's rebellion, first through the breach and all that. It's amazing what boldness a full bladder can inspire. But Robert had stopped listening to my sermons a long time ago, even if I'd still bothered to give them. Then came Robert's death, and the war. I'm not speaking of those brats squabbling over the world's pointiest chair. Powers long asleep are waking and moving through the land. I've seen them in my flames. Shit, I've seen them with my own 2 eyes. The Lord of Light is real. And if he's real, then all of it is real. Man once again faces the war for the dawn, which has been waged since time began. On one side is the Lord of Light, the Heart of Fire, the God of Flame and Shadow. Against him stands the Great Other, whose name may not be spoken. the Lord of Darkness, the Soul of Ice, the God of Night and Terror. According to prophecy, our champion will be reborn, to wake dragons from stone and reforge the great sword Lightbringer that defeated the darkness those thousands of years ago. If the old tales are true, a terrible weapon forged with the lifeblood of a loving wife's heart. Part of me thinks man was well rid of it, but great power requires great sacrifice. That much, at least, the Lord of Light is clear on. I sound like a dried-out old woman, I know. But as our former hand liked to say, winter is coming. When the cold winds rise, all men, no matter their faith or lack of it, huddle beside my night fires. And I pray the prayers, and speak the spells, and beseech the Lord of Light to bring back the dawn. So far, so good. But reprobate as I am, I can't help but wonder what will happen if, one day, our Lord does not answer. Imagine a night that goes on forever, so dark and full of terrors. I think I need another drink.
The Seven are gods of weakness and defeat, pretty chains that the first men kindly put on after the Andals crushed them, except in the Iron Islands. Since the Dawn Age, the Ironborn have followed the drowned god, who plucked fire from the sea and made us to reave and sack and carve our names in blood and song. When the Andals landed on the Iron Islands, they found a god who was father, warrior, and stranger, who took mother, maiden, and crone when he would, and held the smith in thrall. His priests are the drowned men, who are clothed and armed by the sea itself. They consecrate us to the drowned god through our most sacred rite, the drowning, and ask the god to raise us from the sea as he was, harder and stronger. The Ironborn do not fear the bloodiest battles or the roughest waves, for the drowned god taught us long ago that what is dead may never die. When an Ironborn falls, we say the drowned god needed a strong oarsman and took him below to feast in the god's watery halls, attended by mermaids. But even in death, an Ironborn is a warrior. We fight against the storm god, who holds a castle in the clouds, and sends the winds to lure the Ironborn off course or wreck our ships. It's said my legendary ancestor, the Grey King, waged war upon the storm god for 1,000 years. With the drowned god's help, he slew the great sea dragon Naga and used her bones for his haul. After his death, the storm god tried to wash away any memory of this terrible foe, but his songs fill our halls to this day. It was the storm god who first blew the Andals to the Iron Islands, to subdue us and turn us from our faith. True, they conquered and killed our king, but in time they forsook their septs for the shore, and their fat septons for the drowned men. The Andals came to us as conquerors. In the end, they drowned. The Ironborn are of the sea, as our god made us, and given to it as our god taught us. We do not fear the storm god's winds or his waves, but you should, for they bring us to you.
The Father reached his hand into the heavens and pulled down 7 stars, and one by one he set them on the brow of Huger of the Hill to make a glowing crown. The maid brought him forth a girl as supple as willow, with eyes like deep pools, and Hugo declared that he would have her for his bride. So the mother made her fertile, and the crone foretold that she would bear the king 44 mighty sons. The warrior gave strength to their arms, whilst the smith wrought for each a suit of iron plates. But sadly, the gods no longer walk the earth among us, and you can see what a mess we've made of their creation since. Yet we have hope. The gods didn't abandon us in silence, but gave us their holy words to guide us, collected in the oldest and holiest text of the faith of the Seven, the Seven-Pointed Star. Divided into 7 books for the 7 aspects of God, in it we learn of the Father's justice, the Mother's mercy, the maiden's innocence, the crone's wisdom, the warrior's strength, the smith's labor, and the stranger's peace. It is a long book. Many never read it in its entirety, even if they could. When the Andals first sailed for Westeros, filled with divine fire, every warrior carved a 7-pointed star into his body, for even that was easier than carving its namesake into his mind. Though one could perhaps argue that it wasn't the warriors, but the septons and septors, armed with the holy text of the 7-pointed star, who truly conquered Westeros. The first men had no letters, but the runes they would scratch onto rocks. No gods, but the faces they would carve into trees. But then came our holy men and women among them, bearing the very words of the gods under their arms. Trees and rocks were no match for the 7-pointed star, and most of Westeros soon turned to the faith and to its guardians, their new Andal overlords. Whilst the Andals soon fractured into warring kingdoms, the faith remained whole and indivisible, bound together by the 7-pointed star. When those kingdoms fell to Aegon and his dragons thousands of years later, the faith remained subject only to the 7 above and the 7-pointed star below. Or so it was supposed to be. Too often, our High Septons have lost their way, clouded by worldly wealth and power. No matter. We still have the 7-pointed star. Men's will and virtue may fail, but the words never do. As men bow to their lords and lords to their kings, so kings and queens must bow before the 7 who are one. The knees of the powerful work the same as the knees of the weak, and were given to all for the same purpose, to bend before the gods, or break in the bending. Today, men know the 7 as statues in the septs, but in the old days, the gods themselves walked among men. They crowned Hugo of the Hill, the first king of the Andal people, and promised him that his descendants would rule great kingdoms in a foreign continent. When the time came, the Andals carved the 7-pointed star upon their bodies and set sail for the strange land across the narrow sea, Westeros. Whilst Andal warriors battled the first men for kingdoms, Andal septons battled for souls and were received just as courteously. We don't know how many bold and pious men lost their lives, but adversity bred strength. Our purest and most righteous believers took up the sword to defend and preserve the faith from its enemies. So was born the Order of the Faith Militant. When Aegon the Conqueror landed in Westeros, the High Septon locked himself in a sept for 7 days and 7 nights. Finally, the crone lifted her golden lamp and showed him the path ahead. The High Septon himself would anoint and crown Aegon as Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and the Faith Militant rallied behind Aegon in governing his newly united land. Yet Aegon and his sisters never wholly accepted the faith. The High Septon had conceded Aegon's marriages to his sisters as a relic of his Valyrian heritage, which would soon fade. But when Aegon's heir wed his daughter to his son, the faith could brook such abomination no longer. The High Septon led the denunciation of the Targaryens, and all over Westeros the Faith Militant took up their swords against the dynasty and its supporters. The Faith Militant set upon and punished the Septon who had performed the ceremony. A few of the Faith Militant's more militant members even scaled the walls of the castle and would have slain the king and his family had a knight of the King's Guard not intervened. Frightened, the king fled to Dragonstone, where he soon died of cramps. And so ascended the king's younger brother, Maegor the Cruel. His first act was to challenge the Faith Militant to kill him if they believed his rule to be ungodly. To the Order's eternal credit, they accepted. Ser Daemon Morrigan proposed a trial by 7, Ser Daemon and 6 of the Faith Militant, against the king and his 6 champions. It was a contest in which the kingdom itself was at stake, and the accounts and tales are many. But at the end of it, Maegor alone lived, proving that the throne was rightfully his. He mounted the Black Dragon, Balerion, and burnt down the Sept in King's Landing, while the Faith Militant were inside at morning prayers. The screams of the burning and dying men were said to echo throughout the city. Though Maegor had won the trial by 7, he demanded the complete destruction of the Faith Militant and the Faith itself, if necessary. He made war upon the Order wherever he found it. Yet the Faith Militant would not surrender, raising armies of their own and turning Maegor's own lords against him. The Father's justice may not always be swift, but it is certain. One morning, Maegor was found dead on the Iron Throne. No one knows how. Maegor's cruelty died with him. His successor saw the wisdom of a united crown and faith, and his hand reached an accord with the High Septon. As long as the Iron Throne defended the faith would put aside its own swords and its condemnation of the Targaryens. Perhaps the High Septon felt he had no course but compromise. Outlawed and hunted for years, the Faith Militant was but a shadow of its former self. Without its own guardians, the Faith would have to rely on corrupt, worldly kings and their corrupt, worldly courts. For thousands of years, the Faith Militant had stood watch over the Faith. And then, its sun set. Now, after years of war and destruction, of abomination and blasphemy, none can argue that we have been walking through darkness. Perhaps the time has come when the sun must rise again.
Who are the faceless men? It depends on who is asking. To a penitent, they may be relief. To a victim, they may be vengeance. To a lord, they may be an incredible expense. And to the Iron Bank, they may be just another asset. Nobody but the faceless men know their origin, though the Order is rumored to predate the founding of Braavos. We know only that they reside in, or are somehow aligned with, the House of Black and White, that odd and lonely building where few who enter ever leave. Some whisper that those weirwood doors open not on a house, but onto the world of the dead, from whence the faceless men rise when summoned. We can dismiss such foolishness as we do the fishwives who spread it. The House of Black and White is merely a temple, consecrated to the many-faced god, and filled with statuary of his many faces. The old gods of Westeros, the Lord of Light, the Black Goat, the Lion of Night, the Weeping Lady, the Stranger. Perhaps now you understand what is worshipped here, and along with them, other gods whom none alive now recognize, brought here long ago by sailors who never came again. Unlike the priests of other religions, the servants here preach no sermons and perform no ceremonies. As far as one can see, silence and solitude form the whole of their worship, as well as collecting the occasional devotee. If one wants to engage a faceless man, one visits the House of Black and White and pays the price. As for what that may be, those who have paid it rarely speak of it. For make no mistake, from the moment the faceless men accept your offer, the man you named is dead, though he doesn't know it. Perhaps not that day, perhaps not that year, but soon, and inevitably. Many would say you are as much his murderer as if you'd swung the axe yourself, just as many would say that's the point.
A young man walks beside a girl across a flowered field. Spring has come, and this girl is his life. He prays. A child climbs a tree to watch the sunset over the fields. Summer is ending, and the harvest is life for his village. He prays. A hunter tracks a boar through the woods. Winter is coming, and this boar is life for his family. He prays. But to whom do they pray? The world has as many answers as there are men to answer. But walk far enough, climb high enough, hunt long enough, and a man shall find only one God, with many faces. In the faith of the Seven, he is the stranger who guides men from this life to the next. Few seek his favor, or at least, few realize that they do. In the north of Westeros, he is one of the nameless old gods, staring out from the weirwood trees and the snow. In the Iron Islands, he is the drowned god, calling men down to his watery hall. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. In the Far East, he is the Lion of Night, who fathered the world's first emperor on the Maiden Maid of Light, and whose wrath nearly ended the world. In Volantis, he is the Lord of Light, whose followers feed men to the flames to beg his favor. In Lys, he is the Weeping Lady, who sheds her tears for the living, soon to die. In Qohor, he is the Black Goat, and he feeds on blood offerings every day. On holy days, he is offered condemned criminals, and in times of great crisis, he may even be offered the noblest children of the city to beg his protection. Does he accept their gift? Well, the city still stands. For the poor, he is the hooded wayfarer. For soldiers, he is Bacalon, the pale child. For sailors, he is the moon pale maiden and the Merling king. In the house of Black and White, however, he is all of them, and none of them. He is the many-faced god, and wherever a man turns, there he is. Men come from every corner of the world to know him, to beg his favor and seek his gift, for themselves, if their life has grown too hard, or for others who are making it so. It is all the same to the many-faced god. While at Osiris, all men must serve him, beggars and kings. While at Morghulis, all men must die, good and evil. Men worship as they will, but at the end of every road stands the many-faced god, waiting